Hello and welcome back to r/EntitledParents. And if you're new here, I hope you enjoy.
Entitled mother blows up at me for enforcing safety rules on her children. Okay, some backstory is necessary here. The place I work has a carousel, specifically one made back in the 1920s that has a lot of strict rules for riding it. To ensure safety, only 2 of those rules really matter for this story. Rule 1. One ring of the horses is off limits because they aren't 6 feet apart. And rule 2. Hold onto the horse while the carousel is moving. With that out of the way, let's begin. It was a pretty normal day for me at work, with a line of people waiting to ride, when I let this story's entitled mother and her 2 polite daughters onto the carousel. I gave my little spiel of the rules, then let them pass. Before I start the ride, I do a little walk around to make sure everyone is settled, and see daughter 1 has chosen the horse that is off limits. So I walk up and politely remind her of the rule and ask if she would please move to a different horse. She apologizes and moves horse without a peep of a complaint, so I start the ride. As I'm watching the ride turn, entitled mother's other daughter stops holding onto her horse. So, to be audible over the music and the sound of machinery, I cup my hands around my mouth and call, "Keep your hands on the horse, please." She holds onto her horse again, but I see entitled mother lean over and whisper to her daughter. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I'm pretty sure now she was telling her daughter she didn't have to hold on. I say that because when the carousel came round again, the girl was not holding on anymore, so I politely, but loudly, reminded her a second time. Again, the girl grabs the horse, and entitled mother leans over and whispers something. When the carousel comes around again, I see the girl is again not holding on, so I stop the carousel. When it's no longer moving, I walk towards them and start to say, "Hey, I just need you to hold on for safety," when entitled mother gets up in my face and starts screaming at me. "You have no right to talk to my children. You embarrassed my daughter by yelling at her. You do not get to talk to my kids." I immediately back up and start trying to explain. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's my job. But then I get cut off again. "No, you're not just. You're telling my kids what to do, and you have no right to do that. What is your name?" At this point, I'm just crying, because not only is this customer yelling at me, there's a lot of people in the line watching this happen, and it's sending me into an anxiety attack. Luckily for me though, my manager's office is nearby, so she comes out to check on what's happening. I don't know what she said to the entitled mother, because at that point I'd started to have a full-blown panic attack, but the entitled mother and her kids were ushered away by my manager and one of my co-workers. I was later told they were kicked out entirely, while the other person I was working with led me to the office and sat me down in a chair so I could calm down. And our next story. Entitled mother insists I should change my dog's name to not confuse her son about animals. This is so ridiculous and happened like 10 minutes ago. I could not walk home fast enough to get Wi-Fi and share this. Background info. I live in Argentina. I'm an advanced student in English teaching. I have 4 dogs, and one of them is named Monkey. Before lockdown was enforced and made mandatory back in March, I used to tutor a kid who was 5 years old and male. I used to tutor them in English. He would be starting English classes at school this year, and his mum, the entitled mother, had wanted him to have a head start in comparison to the other kids in class. Entitled mother had said that the kid was insecure about starting school and wanted him to feel accomplished and smart by being ahead of his classmates. That's weird logic, but okay. She was paying me good money, and the kid actually showed an interest in the language and all the activities I did with him. So tutoring him was actually enjoyable for the both of us. When lockdown was enforced, we had to suspend the tutoring sessions because public transport was unavailable and they lived in the other corner of the city. Fast forward to today. I took my dog, Monkey, for a walk today and we ran into Entitled Mother and the kid at the park. And the kid was thrilled to meet one of my dogs at last. I had talked to him about them before and showed him pictures. He was very polite and asked what was her name, how old was she, if he could pet her, etc. When I told him that my dog's name was Monkey, he was thrilled to let me know that he knew what that word meant because they had learned about different animals in his classes during the year. Entitled Mother was less thrilled to know that I had named my dog as another animal. She started questioning me, although it felt more like an interrogation, about why I would do that, if I did it just to show off my skills in English, or if I was aware that it would be confusing and so on. I asked her what she meant by confusing, thinking that she meant by the gender of my dog. I find it silly that some people assume animals' gender by their names, but this actually happens, so that's what I was thinking about. But she said, and I'm quoting now, "Why would you try to confuse my son by naming your dog as another animal? He's trying hard to learn things in English because you prompted him to. And now, whenever he hears the word monkey, he's going to think of a dog." I tried to explain to her why I had chosen that name for my dog, but she went on about how I should change my dog's name to something more dog-like, so children like her son would not feel confused about animals. She was very insistent on names I should call my dog, even telling her son to try calling Monkey other names to see if she responded. And I almost told her I could probably call her Entitled Mother's name instead, because she's a bench after all. No confusion there. But I restrained, because her kid was there, and I didn't want to deal with her getting all angry at me in public. The kid said he liked Monkey's name because it's unique and it suits her because of her curly tail, like a monkey cartoon. And I told him it was actually one of the reasons I had chosen that name for her. Entitled Mother realised there was no win for her in this situation, and quickly said some greeting, took her kid and left. Monkey and I actually shared a look for a moment, and I took it as a cue to go home already. And finally, our last story today, my entitled grandma's claim to inheritance which could have ruined me and my siblings' future. Hey all, I've been lurking on this sub for quite a while. Recently, I just passed a requirement to post in this sub, so just wanted to share my story. A little context, my family is a pretty well-off family. My mum and dad have garnered money and land for their businesses and are able to send me and my two siblings to a local international school. The majority of the land which was bought was in my mother's name because of a stupid reason that was totally unrelated to this story, but please do remember this point. My mum, however, passed away with a brain tumour before I could even finish high school 5 years ago, but to this day I'm still affected by that event. Before she passed away, Dad felt that something around the conflicts regarding inheritance would occur, so he tried to clear everything up, even visiting the land registry every day for a whole month, and transferring the inheritance into the name of himself, me and my siblings. Now, as you will probably know, where there's a lot of inheritance involved, your family's about to get busy. Enter Entitled Grandma. Entitled Grandma is my deceased mum's mother. There weren't really any issues to begin with. My dad promised to let Entitled Grandma stay in the home he and my mother had built. The home was registered in my dad's name. He even provided her a monthly payment of around $650 US. Might not sound like much, but in my country it was enough to live comfortably, considering she isn't responsible for rent and other bills. Everything, apart from some minor stupid inheritance claims here and there, seemed fine for about 3 years. The 4th year is when crap gets down. Around about that time, I was doing a master's degree in the UK, which I recently just graduated at the time of this post. My sister is doing an undergraduate in Australia, and my younger brother is about to graduate high school. As it's always been both my parents' goal to send us abroad for education, you can pretty much guess the financial burden my dad has now. Entitled Grandma, however, decides that it's none of her concern and decides to sue. Apparently, according to the lawsuit document, she is entitled to all the land that is registered in my mum's name, prior to her signing it off. The house my dad is letting her live in, along with other stuff worth over millions in US dollars. You might be thinking, what on earth? But didn't your mum sign the inheritance document? This is where it gets more messed up. Despite my dad sending my mum to be treated in one of the best and most expensive private hospitals in the country and splurging nearly $1 million US in medical treatment, Entitled Grandma still claims this person has attempted to indirectly murder my daughter and intends to hog all the inheritance for himself. This included blurting out excuses like tricking her during a not fully conscious state. It's not a brain tumour after all. Feeding her insanitary green water during her homestay period. Or even intentionally instructing the doctors to not fully treat my daughter. What makes my blood boil even more was that Entitled Grandma did not care about the fact that me and my siblings, her grandkids, were still financially dependent on my dad for our education and our livelihood, and wanted my dad put in jail on these charges just for an inheritance scam. The details of the lawsuit and other stuff is complicated, but just to give you a summary, my dad has an upper hand, albeit a few loopholes do exist. As all the documents have been signed, and the patient documents do not support any of her stupid claims. He, however, decided to settle the lawsuit in court by saying that he will pay Entitled Grandmother $500,000 US in cash, allowing her to stay in that home for the rest of her life, and allowing her to collect rent on one of my dad's small condos for the rest of her life also. This is on the condition that Entitled Grandma cuts all family ties with us and never brings the issue of inheritance to court ever again. When I asked my dad why he decided to settle by giving Entitled Grandma money, even though Entitled Grandma filed a lawsuit against him without regards to his financial burden and him still having the upper hand, he simply just uttered, "Your mum loved Grandma very much, and I promised I would never hurt her." The aftermath then. The lawsuit was settled about a year ago. If you're wondering what happens after, well, my mum's family is completely a mess. Last I heard, Entitled Grandmother has already burnt through all of the money and is now receiving death threats from her group of relatives as they want in with the share. Now she's begging to see the grandkids she loves so much. Talk about karma.